In this video, you will hear from Dr. Joseph Volpicelli, leading naltrexone expert researcher and physician. And that's something you really helped me understand more, Dr. Volpicelli, that naltrexone's working to block that kind of euphoric, buzzy effects, where for me, it was like when I was just having my first drink, I was already thinking about the second, the third, the fourth, like, let's go, we're going to keep drinking. But as I got on naltrexone, that quieted down, so I got more control. But then to your point, it wasn't blocking the sedative effects. And I found the longer I was on the medicine, I didn't even really like the buzzy feeling that I got from the alcohol, because I could still get intoxicated, but I
Right.
guess it was more of the sedating effects. And I was like, I don't really like this feeling anymore. I used to love an alcohol buzz, and now I just feel kind of tired and out of it. So that can you, I guess, speak more to that and why that happens?
That's right. And when I use the word buzz, I intended to mean the exciting parts of alcohol. But having said that, there's actually a research study where they looked at the buzz and they found that the uh, the people were still reporting that they got the buzz from alcohol on naltrexone. And so I think what happens is when some people use the word buzz, they're really referring to the sedative effects start kicking in. And so that's the buzz. So let's get rid of the word buzz and talk about the effects of alcohol. And it's clear that in some people, not everyone, but in some people, when they drink alcohol, first 45 minutes after the equivalent of three standard drinks, there's an increase in energy. People will feel, uh, they'll use the word like high. They'll feel increased energy. They'll have increased motivation, increased excitement. Some people interpret that as that they feel more sociable. They're more likely to jump on a table at the Buffalo Bill, before the football games for the so they just feel more like doing crazy stuff. And that's from alcohol's exciting effects that last for about 45 minutes and then it starts to dissipate. As it starts to dissipate, the person might say, I missed that. I'm losing my high, and so they'll need to keep drinking. So after three drinks, the craving for the fourth drink actually increases compared to the craving for the very first drink. And that leads to a pattern where one drink creates the need for the next drink, impaired control. And I think that's the cardinal feature of addiction right there. For some people, for the majority of people, when they drink, they just get the sedative effects of alcohol. They feel maybe a little less anxious or jazzed up. And some people sort of like that feeling. But after one or two drinks, that seems to be enough, and then you can stop. If you drink more than that, you get so sedated that you can black out, or you get motor incoordination, and it's not necessarily a pleasant feeling at all. So for most people, after a couple of drinks, they're perfectly fine to stop. And for those folks, they're not so likely to wind up getting addicted to alcohol. Now, maybe we can spend some more time talking about this later, but there are some people who can actually get addicted to the sedative effects of alcohol. So, for example, I have patients who use alcohol for its sedative effects so that they can sleep, or they're incredibly anxious before social events, and the alcohol slows them down so that they can feel less anxious in social situations. So they use the alcohol not for the exciting parts of the alcohol, but for its sedative effects. Over time, your body habituates to that, right? And so when a person like that was to cut back or stop cycle where
Are you there? Okay, wait, there. I think you're back now.
okay.
There we go. I think it's back. So, I lost you when you were starting to explain when a person like that drinks alcohol, talking about the person with the who gets the sedative effects of alcohol. Do you remember your train of thought there?
Yeah, so for many people who wind up losing control over their drinking, getting addicted to alcohol, is because the body loves that effect of alcohol to stimulate energized behavior. That's most likely related to alcohol's effect to stimulate the release of endogenous opiates, which in turn increases the release of dopamine. And dopamine, of course, is responsible for good feeling, increasing motivation, increasing focus and attention. So you get that nice dopamine effect from drinking alcohol, and that leads to addiction. But there are some people who don't get that effect, but still wind up getting addicted to alcohol, and it's through a different mechanism. And these are people who drink alcohol specifically because alcohol has sedative effects. So, for example, someone might drink alcohol as a way of knocking themselves out so that they can sleep. And again, what happens if you start doing that every night, maybe it takes 2 or 3 drinks to get to sleep, but your body habituates to it, becomes tolerant to the effect of alcohol. So instead of taking 2 or 3 drinks, it takes 4 or 5 drinks. And over time, your body gets used to that. And so your alcohol drinking increases. And then if you were to slow down or stop drinking, you would go through withdrawal, which is a really unpleasant feeling. So instead of being sedated, you feel anxious, sweaty, heart palpitations, tremor. And for someone who redoses on alcohol during withdrawal, it will take away those bad feelings. So now the reward for drinking isn't to get the high anymore, it's to take away the withdrawal. So this is a pattern of drinking which occurs more slowly in time. So for the people who like the high part, you can get addicted pretty quickly. For the people who drink for the sedative effects, that seems to take longer. For folks who use alcohol for its sedative effects, naltrexone is not going to be especially helpful. So that may be another reason why you're not having success using naltrexone. One of the things that complicates our treatment using the Sinclair method is that someone who might start out drinking excessively because they like that high, the energy, if they're doing it enough, that sedative effect, intolerance to the sedative effect is going to kick in. And so now there are 2 reasons why a person will continue to drink, because they like the high, but also to avoid or to take away the withdrawal. And so that's why for some people it takes a long time to see results using naltrexone if they're using the Sinclair method, because while right away your body can learn that the alcohol no longer produces the euphoria, the reward, it takes a while for your body to physiologically adapt to not having so much alcohol in your system. So these tend to be people who are daily drinkers and daily drinkers of large amounts of alcohol. So for some people who are in that situation, for me, it's easier to recommend that they first detoxify from the alcohol, and then they can use the Sinclair method, and they'll have a much quicker road to recovery, to extinction.
And I know when we talk about alcohol detox, like, a lot of people just stop listening right there because 'cause they're like, "I don't wanna do that," it sounds terrible, but, and I know you understand that because 'cause we've talked about that before, but I've also heard you say that there are perhaps other options for people to be able to detox from alcohol safely from home. Is that correct?
Well, there's several options to detoxify. So when people think of detoxification, many times people's brain immediately goes to having to be admitted into a hospital setting and having a significant hospital stay to get detoxified. It turns out it's not that difficult to detoxify from alcohol if you use some medicines like oxazepam or Neurontin, Tegretol. Um, and it can be accomplished in an ambulatory, in an outpatient setting. And so one of the things I discovered way back when we first started using naltrexone was that we could do outpatient detoxification, and it would take about 3 or 4 days, and then people were ready to go on to the naltrexone. And so we would use medicines to help reduce some of the withdrawal symptoms, and people would feel comfortable getting off the alcohol. They wouldn't go through any horrible withdrawal. They'd have less of a desire to need the alcohol to take away withdrawal. And the vast majority of our folks had outcomes that look just as good as if they went inpatient for treatment. We actually published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that, and that paper was published way back in the 1980s. So it's an old paper that people should know about, but often healthcare professionals still believe that it's difficult to get patients to get off of alcohol without going through an inpatient program, and that doesn't seem to be supported by the data.
Interesting. And when you talk about alcohol withdrawal, can you kind of give a few symptoms that might look like? Because you talk about how some people, they're on naltrexone and maybe it's not working as well because they're drinking to relieve the withdrawal effects, and naltrexone's not really i- impacting that, I guess you could say. So, what are some symptoms that somebody knows they may be experiencing withdrawal, even though it might be more mild and maybe they don't even know it's alcohol withdrawal?
Right. So if you think of alcohol's sedative effects, the withdrawal looks like the opposite. So instead of the nerves being calm or sedated, the nerves are hyperactive. And that can show up initially with a tremor. It shows up in increase in heart rate, shows up with sweating, with anxiety. When it's really bad, you can actually have a withdrawal seizure. When it's really, really bad, you can have delirium. That's part of delirium tremens. So it can, it's rare, but it can happen where your body gets disoriented, where you see things. I remember way back, this is how I got involved with doing research with alcohol in the first place, is I had a patient who was in the middle of delirium tremens, DTs, and he was hallucinating. And he hallucinated that I was some threatening person when I was during rounds one time, and hauled off and hit me. But so that it gives me a healthy appreciation of how bad withdrawal can be. Having said that, for the vast majority of people, it's not terrible and can be safely accomplished in an outpatient setting. And after 3, 4, 5 days, you're good to go.
And if someone wanted to look into that, would you recommend, of course, I know you have a practice where you see people. I don't know if you'd recommend them to go there if they're in the state you're in, or see another addiction specialist. What would you recommend as next steps for somebody who's learning this and wants to maybe look into a type of detox from, outpatient?
Yeah. Yeah. So your primary care doctor should know how to do this. My God, I've been trying to teach them for a couple of decades how to do it, and it's not very complicated at all. I've developed protocols how to do it. If they have a question, they can look at. We have protocols that are already written out that explain how to do it, and it's very simple. Where you take targeted benzodiazepine like oxazepam. So when you start to have withdrawal symptoms, you take that and it takes away the withdrawal. So you can use a targeted approach to withdrawal. So it's very easy to use. But if you're in the Philadelphia area, you can certainly come to my practice. But most physicians should be able to do it. You don't need to go into a hospital. It's a relatively simple procedure, and it's effective in the majority of people.
Great. And I wanted to go back really quickly as well and kind of help ask you to speak more about the people who drink for the sedating effects of alcohol, and maybe like they're anxious and they drink to unwind in the evening or to cope with some stress in life or to sleep, like you were talking about, and how I've heard you talk about before that naltrexone may not work as effectively or it may not work as quickly, I believe you said, for those individuals. So I'm curious to have you speak about that more, and I guess really answer the question of, if that's the type of drinker they are and they do want to go on naltrexone. I know you've kind of talked about doing a detox first, but what else would you say to those types of drinkers who are considering naltrexone or maybe even already on it?
Yeah. So again, for some people, they wind up becoming drinkers for both reasons, to get the euphoria, but then over time, they need the alcohol to compensate for the withdrawal. And so one strategy is you take away the withdrawal factors by going through a detox first, and then you're just dealing with the high drinking, which if the naltrexone is very effective in controlling. You could do it the other way, I guess, where you start naltrexone, but the person will probably still continue to drink to avoid the bad withdrawal. Or if they do stop drinking right away, they would feel awful and that could be dangerous. So, so someone who drinks for both reasons, if they just go on naltrexone and don't go through the withdrawal, through the detoxification, they're likely to take longer to get to a point where they can, safely have alcohol-free days. Now, I should point out that the traditional notion is that someone on their own could never gradually reduce their drinking to get to a point where their body is no longer habituated to the effects of alcohol. And that would be sort of a dogma in AA that once you start drinking, there's no way you can control it. But for the people, again, who use naltrexone, it's easier to control how much you drink within a drinking session. And so instead of having 12 drinks in a day, you might willfully cut it back to 11 drinks. So you don't have bad withdrawal, but you're able to keep it at 11. And then maybe the next week you go down to 10 or 9 or 8. And by keeping track, you can willfully control how much you drink until you gradually get down to where you don't have tolerance to the sedative effects of alcohol. Now, so there's people who drink just for the high. There's people who drink for the high and to take away the withdrawal. And then there's a third group of people who drink not for the high at all, but just for the sedative effects. And I would predict that for those folks, naltrexone is not going to be very effective at all. What is effective? And there are medicines that you can take that can help you sleep that are not alcohol. There are medicines you can take to deal with social anxiety, not alcohol. So there's other medicines you can use to help treat the symptoms that a person has, so you won't need to use the alcohol as a way to calm down or to help them sleep or to just knock themselves out. And by working with people and giving them options, you can help them safely get off the alcohol that way. Also, and this is really important to keep in mind, if you're feeling anxious, if you're upset, the other way of coping with things is by coping with things. What is it that's getting you upset? What is it that's stressing you out and dealing with it? Maybe get some counseling, uh, having a good support group. These things are all really vitally important in terms of people's overall recovery. And it's important to take advantage of those social supports. And I have to say that in general, social supports are really critically important for people in their recovery. I mean, that's one of the things that I think AA gets right. That that when people are have peer support or a coach or someone can help hold them accountable, but give them support when they begin to lose hope, that's very important, critically important in terms of people getting better from this disorder. And and so I recommend, from the beginning, we've recommended that if people go on naltrexone using the Sinclair method or daily naltrexone, or if they get a monthly injection of extended release naltrexone, that in addition to using the medicine faithfully, it's also important to have psychosocial support to help you get through the process.
Yeah. Really well said. I appreciate you speaking to that because I was honestly one of those people when I started on naltrexone. I was like, great, this pill's going to help me drink less, no more hangovers. And I was really humbled a few months in because I would say I was one of those people that drank for both. I drank for the reward, but also you better believe I drank for the relief. But I found a few months in that, now with naltrexone drinking on it, it just wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't giving me that same kind of relief that it used to, or that same kind of reward that it used to. Didn't hit the spot as much, and I realized, "Oh, man, if I really wanna have this control over alcohol, I can't be someone who turns to a bottle of wine after a stressful day," and, that was a really difficult reality to come to be honest. Like, I didn't realize how much of my relationship with alcohol was gonna need to change, and how much I needed to develop other coping skills and learn to cope with stress and things of life in different ways, and I had to go to therapy and do a lot of work and make a lot of life changes. But what's cool is I feel like I could learn new coping skills just like I learned alcohol as a coping skill. I learned a bunch of other things as a coping skill. I'm like, okay, now these are my new skills and I don't even want to drink to cope anymore. So really important. Thank you.
That's great. That's a really important story for people to understand that life without alcohol can be really wonderful, that you can learn other ways of dealing with stress. You can open yourself up to other rewards in life and really take advantage of all that life has to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like alcohol had me just narrowly focused on alcohol every day for everything. And as I started to loosen that grip, like the whole world opened up. And I was like, how amazing it feels to go for a hike in nature after a crummy day and you get home and you're just like, ah, where it's like alcohol never really like nourished my soul, it was just more like this numbing agent that worked temporarily.
Yes, exactly. No,
Okay. Go
it's
ahead.
an important story for people to hear, that they know that you can get better.
Yeah. Yeah, knowing that you can get better, exactly. And it's not going to be a life of just fighting an alcohol craving. Like it's really freedom from the problem.